This video shows the tools required and how you'd service the Ratchet and Pawls in a KOM Xeno hub. T25 Torx is good for start. Nice to have a little extension so you've got a little bit of leverage if it's tight. Another necessity really is Loctite. It's 243, ideal to make sure the screws don't come undone when you attach the brake discs back after finishing this job. Important, safety critical. Another nice to have is a screwdriver like this with a T25 on the end. Just makes unscrewing those screws quickly a bit easier. And then a nice one for reassembling. It's good to have a torque wrench. Always worth giving your bike a quick wash before you go to the workshop. So just try and get some of the mud off this area. This is the hub we're going to be working on today. It's 5 years old, Mark 35, so just before proper production, and it's been ridden by somebody who used to break a lot of hubs. Anyway, the ratchet's the bit we're going to have a look at. This is a relatively new ratchet. It was replaced 2 years ago when we upgraded to the latest version of the drive system. Does it need looking at or servicing? Probably not. If you listen to it, it's running really nicely and the ratchet is very free running and clicking nicely. If you had a ratchet on one of our hubs which was starting to get really quiet, then you probably would want to have a look. It probably means that you're starting to fill up the gaps between the teeth with muck. Often if you use pressure washing, you can pressure wash a lot of dirt into the ratchet mechanism. So never use a pressure washer on any pivot on a bike. We'll start by taking off the wheel, which is pretty easily done. Just put it in a low gear and then let's get the wheel off. That's that with it. Okay, so hopefully it should come off pretty easily. That's the wheel off. Right, then the first thing to do is remove this insert, we call it. Okay, now I've been making this so it's quite easy to remove, but often they're not, especially it's been in for years. So there are other ways of doing it. A good one here, it's because we always make them with a recess like that. They're quite easy to grip. So one way you could do it is something like this, plastic tyre levers. This actually works quite well. So you can grip it and maybe leave it off one of these bolts and just give it a little bit of a pull, something like that. And you can just sometimes get them to start a bit more using a bit of leverage. Okay. Obviously you can just pull hard with your fingers. This one comes out easily because it's been removed previously. Another, if you've really got a difficult one and you're a bike shop and you have like a bearing puller or something, if you put a 12mm bearing puller in and then tighten it up, then you can really hold that well and just wiggle it out like that. Hopefully you won't need that, but that's a good trick for bike shops. Once you've got it like this, the next thing to do is remove the bolts. Now, you can use your T25 Torx Allen key, but it's actually quite difficult to get undone, so you know you probably need to do this. And the Loctite, if it's working well, makes it actually quite difficult to undo these, so it might be a while before you get these off. But that's the whole idea of Loctite, to prevent them coming undone accidentally. Okay, you're unlikely to be able to do this if it's the first time and the Loctite's still gripping. All of those out. Okay. Right, now you can sometimes get the cap off, but if not, you can just twist the whole ratchet arrangement and just pull the ratchet off now at this stage. They've got your bits, dirty cap, dirty ratchet, and now you can just clean up all these parts before we put it all back together. If it's running really nicely like this one is, I don't want to mess around with these pulls and get them back in the wrong place. So I'm actually going to arrange the pawls in the way they come out, like a little clock. If you put them back exactly the same place, so much better. Pulling out a little spring. You want somewhere safe to put these because they have a habit of going when you don't need them. So this is another nice thing to have spare if you're about to do this, because you don't want to lose these. It can be very annoying. So for example, this is quite a useful thing because it helps you find them if you drop them, but also just keeps them all in one place. I'm going to arrange them in order, etc. Okay, so you've got the idea there. That's probably enough for cleaning pawls. Do a similar thing with a ratchet. Okay, you can see the ratchet here. The ratchet's still pressed in the brake disc. Okay, have a quick look at the teeth here. So you can clean up those teeth. They look pretty good, don't they, from here? Also the O-ring here is still in place. We won't move that, but you could replace it if you really want to. So we'll go through that really carefully. Sometimes if there's a lot of debris in here, you might actually have to go along here with a blade. So here's a close look at that ratchet again. I hope you can focus, or I can focus on this. You can see I can just remove a little bit of dirt from there. These are actually pretty good. I'm not quite sure how old the ratchet is. It's probably a bit older than the pawls because the ratchet didn't really change in the latest upgrade on the drive system. What's interesting is there's very little in the way of debris in here, which is a good sign, and it probably means that we haven't squirted in too much debris with pressure washing. That does seem to be the killer really for bikes generally, is a pressure washer. So go easy with it, and just don't use it anywhere near a pivot, particularly something with intricate bits like this. Another thing that needs to be cleaned is the inside of the cap. Pretty clean. It is important to get the O-ring right because that can affect how the well, it does affect how the ratchet runs. So there we go. Looking a bit long, that at the moment. That tends to happen with this grease. Right, here's the ratchet pawl holder cleaned up a bit, you can see, and there's just to see that's the freewheel bearings. They're still running okay, nice and loose now. And then there's the pedal bearings, which operate separately, and they're lovely and smooth, just what you want. Right, so we'll stick it back together now, and we'll need some special grease for that. You could use other grease, but we do recommend our special grease. We've tested a lot of different greases, so you don't need very much. This is too much, but just to show you. So we'll start by putting a bit of grease in, and then we just want like a little dab of grease in every pawl slot. I'll do a bit of a close-up too. So to retain the pawl springs when you're loading them, it helps to have just a little bit of grease in that hole where the pawls will go. Do you see that hole there? Just stick a little tiny bit of grease in there. And also you can see there is a little bit of wear on the side of the pawl recess, where it's rubbed off the anodizing. So that'd be a little bit area there. We might want to just lubricate that slightly, because you see, so it's so we don't need to go mad with grease. You can overdo it. You don't want it to be packed solid with grease, because it will stop it working eventually if you pack it completely solid. Somebody has done it. Okay, so we're pretty much close to putting the springs in next, and then the pawls in. Now with this, hopefully you can see, but we've just got to find the pawl hole and just stick the pawls in, and they'll just stay because the grease will hold them in place. So I'm going to stick them all in like that. Okay, so pretty simple really. Right, now we're going to stick the pawls in, and we're starting where the at the top. I'm going to try and put them back in the same place they came out. It's probably not necessary this, but it was running particularly nicely, this one. So just stick it in like that. and you just can work your way around. It's pretty quick this. All the pawls in, a bit too much grease perhaps, but get the idea. There's no point being very sparing. I normally then move the grease around a little bit just to make sure that the critical bits are actually greased. Okay, so you can make sure you've got a little bit on there and a little bit on the teeth if you want. Okay, and again, so I usually make sure there's something along the back there of each one. Before we put it back together, we can put a little bit of Loctite on these lugs. Just a little tiny bit. You can spread it out in a minute with a blade or something. Helps protect the lugs a bit. Less is probably more here. You don't need it covering everything. We've now got to put this on. Can you see the O-ring in here? This one hasn't been disturbed, so I'm not going to mess with that. I'm just going to use that O-ring again, and I might put some of this grease, this excess grease, on these teeth as well. Just make sure that all the teeth have got a little bit of grease too. It will tend to distribute itself a bit. If you're putting a new O-ring in, you do want to make sure the O-ring is greased all the way around so that it can slide together and make a really good seal. You can see a little bit of Loctite on the lugs faces, which these are going to locate on. And now we've just got to put the ratchet and brake disc assembly together. Okay, you can sort of rotate them into place like this. Okay, which is a little bit easier said than done, but hopefully, there we go. You can see all located in place. Okay, and then we can just rotate and slide this into position, and now it should be working again. We put a bit of grease on the teeth. If you wanted to put a bit more down in the teeth, you can do like that, but we've probably got plenty of grease there. The next issue is getting the cap on, and this area is where you want to be careful. So what I normally do is turn this. You can feel how easily it turns, the ratchet, and then if you get the cap on correctly, it will continue to turn properly. However, if you get the O-ring, you see the O-ring here, if you get the O-ring caught in the mechanism, it won't seal, but much more importantly, it'll jam up your pawls and stop them working so well, and that does make them work not nearly as well. So it's important to get this next bit right, which is to get that seal in the right place, which is around this lip sealing here, and it stops the grease coming out and the water going in, but it needs to be in the right position. So how to do that? Again, I hope you can see this are not the best colours, but we need to fill this recess here with grease, and then we're going to just sort of stick the O-ring in the grease so that we can move it around like this without the O-ring falling off. Okay, I'll just do that and then show you what it looks like when it's done, but basically just going to add grease in here. How I've added grease around there, made like a little wedge of grease all the way around, and that's going to be useful to hold the O-ring in place. Stick the O-ring in. If it's a new O-ring, you might have to stretch it a bit because you really want the O-ring to be pressing on the walls here. This one's actually enlarged because it's been in for a couple of years, and the grease seems to react with the O-ring slightly and just causes it to swell slightly, but that's not a problem for us. It helps it hold in place. Locate that, you see, like this, all round till it's located all the way around in the grease. Okay, I'll come back when that job's done. It's a bit boring to watch. Right, there we have the O-ring. You can probably see it all the way around, ready to go. So now we've just got to put it on the top. You can see we can turn it upside down, it doesn't fall off. So now we can just locate it correctly, and then we just push it into place like that. We can check, still runs nice and smoothly. So that's a really good stage to get to. The next stage is to make sure there's Loctite on all the screws. You don't want this to be super strong thread locker. You just want it to be stuff that you can get undone again. 243 is very good for that, but it could be any other. Blue thread locker is usually medium to light strength. You can put these in. I can tighten these up. If you had problems pushing on the ratchet, it's quite possible you may find that the ratchet's not fully pulled onto the hub. Then you need to check carefully and then evenly tighten these as it pulls the ratchet, that's the silver component behind the brake disc, onto the hub shell. This went on relatively easily, but sometimes it can be quite a tight fit, especially if you've got new O-rings and maybe you haven't greased the O-ring well enough to let it really slide on. So now I'm just going to tighten these up fully, then we'll use the torque wrench to just get in the right. Go 6 set on the torque wrench. Just want to check we've got everything right. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so it's pretty much back together. We've now torqued it all. We've got Loctite on all the threads, so we're pretty sure that's good and safe. You can check again. It's all working. You can see or hear that the excess of grease has dampened down the clicks a bit, but it will soon spread out. So all we've got that remains is to put the cap back in, and then we can put the wheel back on the bike. Here's the end cap that I pulled out, or we call it an insert, end insert, and it's got 2 O-rings. This O-ring locates it in place, and this is the seal inside the cap. I'll take both these off and put them on a unanodized silver version, so you can see where they go a bit more clearly in place. But when I show it on this shiny silver one, you can see how the O-rings fit, and we'll come to fit that in a moment. You can see. You can put this now into the hub, and we're just going to check here, and that's really quite tight. You see that lump sticking in the side. So this is one of the ways you can tune basically the tightness of the seal. And I can try it again back in here. It's still now it's running nicely now. Okay, so it's running nice and smoothly. So at this stage, having got that set how I want it, I can now add that O-ring back in and then push it home, having put a little bit of the same grease in here.